I appreciate you coming out today and hearing a little bit about our levy that will be taking place on the November 3rd ballot. We have a number of these meetings for the next few weeks in the morning like this for folks who that it's easier on their schedule. We also, we have some documents there where we have on Tuesday evenings at Park High School and Wednesday evenings at Woodbury High School. So our campaign, as we've looked at the factual piece of it, we call it Taking the Next Steps. If you've lived in our community, you know that we had a levy campaign in 2013. And at that time, we asked our community to consider questions that would fund certain aspects in our school districts, enhance certain things. One was safety increases. Another one was technology infrastructure, the wireless system and the infrastructure for students to utilize technology in the classroom, and to look at some staffing increases, and then also our fund balance. So I'll talk a little bit about how we have gotten to this point for this election in 2015. But we've talked about taking the next steps as we move forward over the next 10 years in the school district. So one of the things that I think is important for our community to understand about our district, we have high academic achievement that we're very proud of. We look at 15 metro school districts that we compare ourselves to, and we have trend data over the years. And we measure in a number of areas, but currently we're #1 in science as a district in achievement of the 15 school districts, and we're 5th in math and reading. When you look at the metro areas or any school district, we're always in the top as far as student achievement, and we're above the state average, and we're very proud of that. We certainly have challenges. We are working very hard to focus on closing the academic disparities between student groups and between schools, but we've had a very successful year last year and also years ahead of this. So this election is about maintaining what we have. We're not seeking additional funds to add programs. We want to make sure that the district that we built to this point and the successes that we have, that we can maintain those programs. We are a district of choice. We have a lot of parents that move here because of our reputation and because of the type of education that kids receive and after they leave us after graduation, that they're prepared to do anything that they want. We also have a number of folks that are seeking open enrollment every year, and we're proud of that piece. Our community has also been a major portion of our success. You as community members have been very supportive. You partner with our schools, you work with us to help us educate all of the kids that come through. You've also been very supportive over the years with financial, when we've asked for financial support in building buildings and in increases. But our Board of Education has worked very hard not to come to the community for increases in our general fund or general referendum levies. Now, if you've been here, you may you may question, well, it seems like you're on the ballot as a school district quite often, and I'll show you that, because we have had bond elections when we built Eastridge, and when you have a levy election, they only last 10 years and then they expire, so districts come back out for renewal. And we do have financial constraints that lead us into this situation. We have had over the last 10 years that the funding from the state has not been able to keep pace with inflation. So our cost of doing business, so to speak, or our cost of education has increased and our revenues have not. So we've done a couple things. We have continued to reduce our budget and to make budget reductions, but we've also made a decision to spend our fund balance or our savings account down so we did not have to reduce programs for kids. We made a conscious effort that we did not want to remove the programs and reduce services for students that we built up over the years, so we were using our fund balance. Well, we've gotten to the point now that we can no longer do that. We went through a budget reduction process where we identified the need to reduce $8 million last year in order to maintain the minimum fund balance policy that the Board of Education has set. When we had those meetings, we had a number of public meetings. We had 400 people attend and give us feedback in person, and we had 700 people that completed surveys, and we heard a couple themes that came from those meetings. One is we didn't realize that you were in this situation, and we'd like to have an opportunity to support the school district before you do cut programs or eliminate programs. And the second is, if you're going to come out on the ballot, we'd like you to ask us for what you need versus coming back over and over again. So through the process, well, before I talk about that, this graph shows over the years, the gold bars are our revenue, and the purple bar shows our expenditures, and just again graphically that the expenditures are outpacing the revenue. The green at the bottom here, that's our fund balance policy. And you can see that we've been spending it down, us planned spend down, but if we don't do anything different, we'll actually drop below zero as a fund balance. And as statutes, if you end up at a 2.5% negative fund balance, the state will take the school district over. It's called statutory operating debt. So we will not be looking at moving that direction. We'll continue to make reductions, but this is what leads us into this election this year. So we know that education, because it's expensive, it's really a partnership in three areas. One, we need to be responsible as a school district to spend the taxpayers' money wisely and be good stewards of that financial support that we receive. And so one of the things that we've done is continually look at how we can become more efficient, how we can reduce our budget, how we can cut back on things. And if this levy is successful, our commitment is to continue to do that. We have to constantly look at trying to be more efficient, looking at ways we look at our contracts, ways we can provide services to students that may be less expensive than we currently are providing, where we can save money and be frugal with the funds that we go through. So that's an important aspect of funding the school district and funding education in general in the state. The second is working with our legislators and our representatives that work with our school district. We speak with them on a regular basis during the session. I've testified at different hearings. Dan Pine, our finance director, is up there quite often testifying, helping the legislators understand our story and what type of difficulties we're having, so we can give them advice and give them suggestions on different aspects of funding streams that would help us. The state gives us money in a couple different ways. They provide us funding on the base. They call it the base formula. That money comes into our general fund, and we are able to spend that money the way we believe we need to spend it to educate the students in our district. We have flexibility in our general fund to allocate funds. Then we receive a variety of funds in categorical aids or for certain aspects. We have special ed funding comes as a category. It needs to be spent for special needs students. We have compensatory education funds that come in and need to be spent in schools based on the free and reduced lunch count. We have funding that comes for all-day kindergarten that needs to be spent for all-day kindergarten. All of the categorical aids are wonderful for kids. But as we see increases each year, what we ask our legislators to consider is to put the increases on the base, to give us the base funding that allows us some flexibility that we could offer the services that the state is interested to, but looking at our entire budget, we may be able to do that in different ways. But once money comes in categorically, it's locked in to spend it that way. So I'm telling you that because you'll see that over the years, there has been increases in educational funding, but the majority of the increases have come in categorical funding. This year we had a 2% increase on the base, which is a higher percentage increase than we've had in a long time, which is great. But for our school district, the situation that we're in, that we're looking at base funding, the need for base funding. And that's why working with our legislature is very important, or our leaders. And then the community, the third aspect is coming to you as a community to help as far as support. In the 1970s, the state gave us authority to hold these type of elections. At that time, the state was looking at if districts wanted to add certain programs or certain approaches to education that the state wasn't funding, they were perfectly fine with that if the community supported that. So we started with these levy elections that might have been for specific needs. But over the years, the state has put more and more emphasis and burden on local communities, so these levy elections has become a normal part of the budgeting process. And that's why if you've lived in Minnesota your entire life, you used to not see levy elections from school districts, and now you see them fairly frequently because of the way the funding has shifted. And it's gone from not just asking voters for support for specific extra things, but for some base funding as we're looking at today. So our commitment is this is a partnership. This isn't about simply needing more money. It's about us doing our part to be fiscally responsible. It's about the state helping to continue to look at the costs of education and everything else the state has to do. And then it's about the community being able to help support a portion of that as well. So we have 3 questions that will be on the ballot. One is a levy question or a general referendum question. To keep in mind, levies are for learning. That's increases in base funding that we can utilize in the classroom and for educating students. We'll also have 2 bond questions, and bonds are for building. Those are questions to take care of classroom space and brick and mortar additions that allow a school district such as ours that is facing continued growth of new students come in to build spaces for students to be educated. So those funds, the bond funding cannot be spent in the general fund to do anything that we want with it. It's dedicated to building, and it has to be spent there. Okay. Also, I clicked off of that, but bond money, when you finance a building, is financed over 20 years. So it's like a 20-year home mortgage. Levies only last 10 years, as I said, so that financing will last 10 years, and then the law is that you need to come back to your voters and ask the voters in your community, do you still support that levy? Would you renew it or would you revoke it? And that's important as you look at some of the amounts that I'll show you and the tax impact. So as we got into the budget reduction process last year, the Board of Education asked, what is the amount of money that we would need for 10 years to be able to address the issues that we're facing? And those issues are not to cut programs and services to students, to stop the deficit spending. We can no longer use our savings account because we spent it down as far as we can. To take care of and address the cost of living, because every year there's an increase in just the cost of doing business. And to move us forward in certain areas, such as staff development or curriculum. During that 10-year period, the amount that we were looking at still has us looking at budget efficiencies, continuing to look at how we can be more efficient. And on our website, when you go to our homepage, there's the 2015 election, and when you click on that, there's all sorts of in-depth information. But we also look at, there's a study that's done on a regular basis of the 48 metro school districts. And they compare our spending in a number of areas. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is that in the current research on spending, we are 48 out of 48 for administrative spending from central office. So we're in last place. And I tell you that not because this has anything to do, this levy, with administrative support or adding administrators, and I'm not advocating for that. But if you compare that to classroom spending, we are 21st out of 48 in classroom spending. So why I use that example is we have put our money at the classroom level. And that's one example of efficiencies that we have tried to reduce in areas and try to stay away from the classroom as much as possible. We're very proud of that too. That the most important thing is that our teachers have the tools that they need, and our teachers can continue to move our students forward. So that's where in the amount we've identified, there's still efficiencies we'll continue to look at. So that amount is $900 per pupil. $900 per pupil increase would generate about $18 million. Over the next 10 years, the life of that levy, that amount would allow us to address the not cutting programs, stopping the deficit spending, taking care of the cost of living, being able to look at some of the areas that help the classroom, such as curriculum and professional development. And at the same time, we still need to be over that time, be more efficient. So board elicited a demographic company that we've used for a lot of years, the Morris Leatherman Company. They do demographic studies for the state of Minnesota and districts and municipalities. They've been doing that for 40 years. We had a survey done of our community, and a couple things came out of that survey. The community had strong support for what we're doing as a school district. They supported the board and the vision of the school district. 87% of the patrons that were part of the survey believe they received a good educational value for their dollar. So we felt good about the support and the direction that our community saw we were going. But when we asked about the $900 per pupil, that price point was high. That was a high dollar amount. They understood, and I'm summarizing what Peter Leatherman talked to the board about. You can see that in the archive. He did that in a public session, giving us information. They understood the need for support, but the $900 was a high price point. So the Board of Education discussed looking at this 2015 levy and tying it to the 2017 election. We have a levy that's going to expire in 2017, so we have to be back on the ballot to see if the community would be willing to renew that. So the board asked us to determine how much per pupil would we need for the next 2 years till we get to the 2017 levy, and see if we could look at tying these together. So in doing the analysis, it was determined that $525 per pupil would be able to allow us to not make the reductions we've identified through our budget reduction process last year, and I'll explain that in the next slide, to stop the deficit. We're spending about $4 million above our revenues each year to address the cost of living, and then consider in 2017 coming back to our community and asking for the $375 to look at the total package of $900 going forward. So that's how we determined what we will be asking voters to consider on the ballot of $525 per pupil and having these two elections together, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. This slide shows that one of the reasons why you as community members see us on the ballot so often is that we've had a number of levies over the years, and as they expire, we're back for renewal. In 2013, we had a renewal, and we had our last levy where there was an increase for, as I said at the beginning, safety and a couple other areas. That will expire in 2023, so we will be back considering approval for that again. If we're successful in 2015, those would expire in 2025. And 2017 has to be renewed. That would expire in 2017. We also were on the ballot for the Eastridge High School building in 2005, I believe. So there's been a number of elections that we've been part of, but it hasn't been, each election has not been for asking for increase in general funding. So operating question one is about maintaining programs. As I said, it would generate $10.3 million. It's about sustaining the programs we have. In the budget reduction process last year, as we went through with the community and we were identifying the $8 million of reductions, when the community, the themes, as I said, one of them was to give us a chance to support you through an election before you eliminate these programs. The board made a decision that we eliminated reduced $4.6 million, but we held off $3.4 million to see what would happen in the fall. And we've already identified what would be eliminated if the election wasn't successful. We went through that with the process. We have, and I think that slide must not be in, is it coming up, Andrea? Okay, then I'll go over that in a minute. But this is about, as I said, not adding, but keeping the district programs that we have. It's about maintaining financial stability and stopping the deficit spending. And it's about recruiting and retaining high-quality work staff. Over the years, as we have tightened our budget and made reductions, we have not been able to keep pace with the metro area for taking care of employees and be able to recruit them. So we have a number of contracts that we work through, and many of them are below average as far as the average compensation. And we want to make sure we're asking teachers to do great things with students. But in a study that came out last year through the state, they looked at the average teacher salaries, and our average teacher salaries are not in the top 100 districts in the state. And so it is important for an organization to take care of their employees. So part of this is making sure that we have the highest quality teachers and we can maintain that. And we slowly have dropped back. So we want to, over the next years, start to move back to where we once were before we started into having some of the budget reduction issues that we've had. So here are, as I mentioned, we identified what would be reduced through our budget reduction process. The board has already approved these. If we are not successful, we would continue to, or we would reduce more staff. And I should say why we would reduce staff. 83% of our budget is in people because we are in a people business. And so when I talk about reducing staffing, that means eliminating positions, teachers and other support people. So we eliminated staffing this year out of the 4.6, but we would have an additional elimination of about 385,000. We would reduce our special education staffing for about 180,000. We looked at band and orchestra. One of the things that our community asked for in the past, as they wanted to make sure that our kids have the same experiences they see in other areas, is music education and foreign language education at the elementary. So we have band and orchestra that starts in 4th grade. And so we looked at, that was one of the areas that we looked at eliminating through this process. We say orchestra to community ed. We'd like to provide services to kids, but it wouldn't be during the school day. And then we have a reading recovery program that is a reading intervention for students that costs about $1 million a year. It's a very good program that teachers work individually with students, but it is expensive. So we looked at reducing that this year, and then we looked at contracting our busing services. If we contract it out, we have an estimate through analysis that we would save $2 million. And so those are already identified. Additionally, we'd have to go through and eliminate $4 million more in our budget. Through the process, we've explored this, and we have a number of things. We did not list them here because we'd still have a process coming back to the community. But we've had discussions about further looking at reading recovery. We would definitely impact more staffing because we'd have to, as I said, about being in a people business. We've looked at our middle school schedule. We have a schedule that's built around what's the best approach to educating middle school children, but we've had discussions about looking at a different schedule that would mean mainly eliminating electives and running more of a 6-period day. And we do have information that you can gather on the website. So that's what would take place. I think it's important for our community to know this. People feel uncomfortable when you identify this as this sounds threatening. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. What I want our community to know is we had a large process last year and a collaborative process with the community. These are just the facts of the situation that we've identified that we would move forward with. So here's the tax impact on the general levy question. These are average or a number of home prices. We've traditionally indexed off of a $250,000 home. But we will have, as we've had in last elections, a calculator that you can link to on our website and put your own home value in to see the estimate. But for a $250,000 home, the tax impact would be $266 a year or $22 a month for that general levy question. And I'm going to give you a chance to ask questions, so I want you to know I know I'm going through this, but we'll come back and answer any questions that you have when we finish up. So that's our general levy for learning question and the information around that question. We also had a 10-year facility study done this last year and a half. We've been working on that. We work very closely with our cities, and both our two largest cities, Cottage Grove and Woodbury, that we serve, have a number of houses already planned for development. And we believe that we will see in the next 10 to 15 years, in working with them and doing our studying on growth patterns and all of the things on their master plan, between 1,700 students and a potential to move up to 2,700 when all of the homes that are already planned for would be built out. Now I say there's a range there because the housing market started to pick up and then it slowed a bit on new housing starts. And so there may be some time periods that might extend a little bit depending on the housing market, but we know with the master plans that we have number of students. We're a growing district and will continue to grow. So from the long-range facility, we had 4 areas that we wanted to address in our long-range planning. One is that we have very concentrated growth in our northeast quadrant of the district, in the Woodbury area there, where there's more developments and a lot of growth. So we needed to take care of that growth. We have some very large buildings that are at capacity that we have to look at some space, and we have continued growth that'll feed into those areas. We wanted to look at additional middle school space. When we built Eastridge High School, we moved away from a junior high model to a middle school model because that's the best approach to educating middle school students. But what happened is we built a new high school, so we added high school seats, and we moved our 9th grade into the high school. So we had a 4-year traditional high school approach. Then we moved the 6th grade class out of the elementaries into the middle school to make a 6-8 middle school concept. So that freed up some space at that time for our elementary to take on the growth that has continued to take place. But the middle schools, we didn't add seats. We just traded grade levels. So we knew that the middle school would be the first area that we would see an impact as our communities continued to grow. So we needed to take a look at that to address our growth in the future. We also have 2 schools that share a building. We have Nuevas Fronteras, which is our Spanish immersion school, and we have Crestview, and they share a building, and both of the schools are too big to be in one building. And we've been looking at trying to make sure that we could have find an area where we could put our Nuevas school so they could grow into a 2-section school and be a standalone school, and then Crestview would be able to go back to a neighborhood school and have extra space for the growth that's coming in Cottage Grove. So that was another issue to look at. And then the impact of the new residential developments. So we had a large community collaborative process and analyzed all of the information that we had working with the cities, with Mike Vogel, who is our facilities planner and does our projections. We also had outside demographers look at our numbers to validate, because there's always been questions, are you sure about this? And we want to make sure that we are as we look at that. So from that process, we've identified how to move forward. So the first bond question is for $96 million, and that's to address the middle school growth. And what's included in that is to build a new Altman Middle School. Where Altman Middle School sits right now is it's in a neighborhood that's aging in place, and we've continued to decline in enrollment. We don't see that on the horizon changing. It also, the location is not as advantageous for the growth we're going to see in Cottage Grove and for Woodbury. So if we looked at it, we've had questions on why would you look at a new Altman Middle School rather than remodeling Altman and leaving it there? Well, one is if we stay in that spot where the growth is coming, we'll have students on buses for a long time. The second aspect of Altman, it was built as an elementary school. Then we've used it for a number of things, high school and middle school over the years. We've added on to it, kind of piecemealed. There's sections of the building that are 50 years old, and it's not a building that is built and works for middle school, the middle school concept that we've moved to with our other middle schools. So the building is set for an elementary, so the proposal is to build a new Altman Middle School on the other side of Highway 61 at the intersection of, we're looking at negotiating for land on the intersection of 65th and Geneva and Century. The Century goes one way and Geneva goes another. But right there is a central location that would be able to take the growth that's coming in the next 15 years from both Woodbury and Cottage Grove. And the ultimate goal with the middle school is to have 4 middle schools. We're not going to add an extra one, but 4 middle schools that will have the capacity to take 1,300 students each. So this first building of Altman, we will build it for 1,100 students with an added addition that can be added as the growth continues to move it to 1,300. We also will go back to Woodbury Middle School and Lake and Cottage Grove and add some spaces there for some classroom space to make sure that they will be able to come to the capacity of 1,300, but also some common spaces. One of the issues at Lake Middle School, which is getting close to capacity, is that there's classroom space that's available, but Commons areas, lunchroom space, different things like that is at premium. So we have lunches that start at 10:30 and go to 1:30. And so we would look at adding on to make sure that the infrastructure in all 4 middle schools is appropriate for 1,300 students. And we believe the 1,300 student middle school number will address our needs in the next 10 to 15 years of growth. The impact on a $250,000 home would be $104 a year or $9 a month. Again, it's lower than the general levy because it's financed over 20 years of the building. So what we would do with the current Altman building is we would remodel that building for Nuevas Fronteras, our elementary school. We would probably, and the plans aren't completed, we have to wait and see what happens in the fall, but we may demolish some of the older sections of the building. We don't need such a large footprint for the elementary school. And we would have some space there also for community education. We will have the pool that's still there that will run with the community, with community ed. And we also lease spaces for community education, so we'd have some room for some space there. The other aspect I should tell you about the new Altman Middle School, we're working with the City of Cottage Grove to have, we want to get into a joint agreement, powers agreement, much like we did with the City of Woodbury when we built Eastridge, to look at possibly additional field space for the community, possibly a larger auditorium that the community could utilize like we have at Eastridge. And so we're hoping, and we're very optimistic with the discussions we've had with the city, that new middle school will be a community school as well that will be advantageous for our district in this side of the district as well. The other question, the third question, is to address high school needs and then our elementary needs. It's for $46.5 million. What it would do is add additional space to our 3 existing high schools, so they would have the capacity, all 3 traditional high schools would have the capacity for 2,300 students. That number also then allows us to deal with the growth in the future. And then we would go back to all 14 elementary schools and make additions and remodels as the school needs dictate. Some of our older elementary schools need special education classrooms as we have grown and added programs. Some need music rooms or orchestra rooms. Some need some common spaces. We do have a footprint that doesn't have common spaces for students when you come in. But just as we did with Eastridge, when we build new buildings, we'd like to go back to our existing buildings and do remodeling so we keep the buildings in great shape, and then all of our community is part of the enhancements once we look at bond questions. So that would, on a $250,000 home, that question would cost $48 a year or $4 a month. So if all 3 of these questions would pass on a $250,000 home, it would be $418 a year, or about $33 a month. So the way it's set up on the ballot, the board wanted to make sure that community members had a chance to look at the level of support and where they felt that the compelling needs were. The first question is our operating levy. I should tell you, as I explain this, people will vote for all 3 questions. But the second question is our middle school question, and that one cannot pass unless there's a majority of people and the first question passes. And the reason that they're written and they're tied together is that we can't build new space and staff new space without the increase in the general levy dollars. So if the community supports question 1, then question 2 has the possibility to pass. If that question 1 does not pass, then question 2 cannot pass. Question 3 is dependent on both question 1 and 2 passing before it has the chance to pass. Again, it's not that people will stop voting if they vote no on question 1. It's what the city will do or the county will do once they tally the ballots. So you'll see that on the ballot. It's explained that way. I believe the ballot questions, we have a draft of those, and those are on the website. So you can actually read the wording, but it explains that as we go through. So the election is on November 3rd. We will have more of these meetings after you leave here, and we'll take questions now, but there's information. We're trying to put as much information on the website. We're trying to get information in the newspaper. We're trying to use every venue to give people as much information. So We encourage them to go to the ballot or to go to the voting box and on the 3rd, but to go with the information regardless of where their decision is on support or not. We just want them to have the information. And these are our public meetings. You're attending today on the 27th here, but we also will have on October 1st and the 22nd a 10 o'clock meeting here. And then we're at Woodbury the 23rd, the 7th, and the 21st at night at 6:30. And at Park, we had a meeting on the 15th. We'll have the 29th, 13th, and 27th at 6:30. We want to give as many opportunities for people to come in and hear about this election and to ask questions. So we have one quick, we'll finish up just with a video and then we'll open up for questions. We had produced a video about the good things that happen in the school, and we'll just show you that, which takes a few minutes.
What I've experienced over the last couple of years that I have worked here is just how passionate people are to do what's best for kids.
The value of our school district is we have exceptional educators working with each and every child every day to make them succeed. Just a wealth of opportunities for our students to be involved. We have wonderful options for students, from music to art to accelerated classes.
It's our community, it's our people, our families. Every opportunity a child could possibly dream about, we seem to offer that in our schools.
And you think about the diverse programs that we can offer. Having 3 high schools is a huge advantage because we can have an IB program in one school. We can have a STEM program in another school. We can have a Spanish immersion program in the 3rd school. And guess what? Students can cross those high school lines, and we can do that.
Without the music education programs that my daughter has experienced, I can't imagine what kind of a student she would be today without the leadership, without the self-confidence, and without the broad range of experiences that the school system has offered her.
Through the Spanish immersion experience and great teachers, the teacher involvement and the teacher commitment that we have seen throughout the years, my son has just really thrived here in this school district.
I do plan to attend a 4-year university. It's all from the fact that this district has great academics and has really pushed me to continue my education.
South Washington County Schools, as I have come to really appreciate in my role on the Education Committee in the Senate, is one of the largest. It's the 6th largest in the state. So that brings a lot of opportunities for all students of all types and interests and abilities and talents. And I think South Washington County does a really excellent job of making the most of that.
South Washington County has been a leader in education priorities.
People want to live in this district. I mean, people specifically move here to be part of District 833.
We've been in the community for 35 years. It's been really fun to be part of the community, to serve the community as a school bus driver. I think it's neat to be driving for co-workers, friends, neighbors.
Good schools mean a lot to communities, and you hear the stories about how they help property values, which is true, and you hear about the fact that they serve as a great attraction for young families, and that's true too. But most importantly, that they're just the glue that hold our communities together.
Strong education system is a foundation for our economy and for public safety, for healthy communities.
You want to live in a community where people are doing good things and doing good things for others. We try to instill that as we move forward, that the problems that students will solve now and the learning that will take place on how to be a good problem solver and a good thinker will translate when they become community members.
After the time my kids are done, they go on to college and go on to the rest of their lives, we're still going to care a lot about the quality of South Washington schools, because the next set of families who comes in is just as important as the families who are here today.
I just really want to say thank you to everyone. You know, it takes all of us to support this district and the goals that they have. And so, thank you.
Together, we are taking the next steps.
Together, we're taking the next steps.
Together, we're taking
the next steps.
The next steps.
The next steps.
Together, we're taking the next steps.
Together, we are taking the next steps.
Together, we are taking the next steps.
Together,
we are taking the next steps.
The next steps.
The next steps.